Most people will go their entire lives never realizing that one night, while the world slept and history moved quietly forward, an unseen audience was listening to the Quran for the very first time. And what they heard shook them so deeply that it changed their destiny forever. This was not a dream, not a legend, and not a metaphor. This was a real event preserved in the Quran itself, a moment when a hidden creation leaned into the words of Allah and instantly recognized a truth that many humans still struggle to accept. Before going any further, take a second and ground yourself in this moment. Thank you for being here with Islamic Insight. From which country are you watching this video right now? And if learning about Islam, the Quran, and the unseen world strengthens your faith, make sure you subscribe and stay connected. There is something deeply unsettling about the idea that you can be completely unaware, while another world stands just beyond perception, listening, reacting, and making decisions that carry eternal consequences. Surah Al-Jinn begins by pulling that curtain aside. It does not ease you into the story. It confronts you immediately with a statement from Allah that He revealed to His messenger that a group of jinn listened attentively to the Quran. Not debated it, not tested it. They listened. This alone should stop us. Listening in the Quran is never passive. It is an act of humility, a willingness to receive truth without ego standing in the way. These jinn were not seeking entertainment, and they were not searching for magic or power. Something drew them in, something they could not resist, as if the words themselves carried a weight that bent reality toward them. Islam teaches that jinn are real beings, created from smokeless fire, living in a realm hidden from human sight. They share this world with us, but move through it differently, unseen, unnoticed, yet fully accountable before Allah. Long before this moment, jinn had their own societies, beliefs, arguments, and divisions, just like humans. Some were righteous, others corrupt. Some worshipped Allah correctly, others followed false paths. They were not blank slates. They came with assumptions, histories, and misconceptions. That is what makes this moment so powerful. When the Quran reached their ears, it did not confirm their biases. It shattered them. The night they heard the Quran was not announced with thunder or spectacle. According to authentic Islamic tradition, the Messenger of Allah was reciting the Quran during prayer, unaware that he was being listened to by anyone beyond the human realm. There was no intention to address the jinn directly, no invitation extended to the unseen. And yet they gathered. They came close enough to hear every word clearly. When they realized what they were hearing, they did something extraordinary. They warned each other to remain silent. Listen carefully. Do not interrupt. Do not distract one another. This detail matters because it shows reverence. It shows that even before belief fully entered their hearts, respect for the message had already taken root. As the verses flowed, the jinn immediately recognized that this was not poetry, not human speech, and not something learned or imitated. The Quran itself records their reaction in their own words. They described it as a wondrous recitation that guides to what is right. Think about who is saying this. These were beings who had existed for generations beyond human counting, beings who had heard countless forms of speech, whispers of the unseen, and influences of falsehood. And yet this recitation stood apart from everything they had ever encountered. It did not confuse them. It clarified. It did not overwhelm them. It aligned something deep within them that had been fractured for a long time. What makes this even more chilling is how fast belief settled into their hearts. There was no prolonged resistance, no bargaining, no delay. They said clearly that they believed in it and that they would never associate anything with their Lord again. This is not blind faith. This is recognition. Islam teaches that truth has a sound to it, a weight to it, and when it reaches a heart that is not sealed by arrogance, it settles naturally. The jinn did not need miracles beyond the Quran itself. The Quran was enough. After listening, they did not keep this experience to themselves. They returned to their people with urgency. Their tone was not casual. It was serious, almost heavy. They spoke about Allah with a new clarity, correcting false beliefs they themselves once held. They admitted openly that they had previously held incorrect ideas about Allah, that they believed lies spoken among themselves, exaggerations passed down without proof. This confession is one of the most striking parts of Surah Al-Jinn. These beings were not trying to preserve pride, they were trying to preserve truth. They spoke about Allah as He truly is, declaring that His majesty is far above what anyone claims about Him. No partner, no child, no equal. They acknowledged that some among them were righteous and others were not, and that they themselves were divided into different paths. This honesty is unsettling because it mirrors humanity so closely. The same divisions, the same struggles, the same accountability. Surah Al-Jinn removes the illusion that humans are unique in their moral responsibility. Every conscious being stands before Allah on the same scale of truth. There is also a sense of shock in their words, a realization that something in the universe had shifted. They admitted that before this revelation, they attempted to reach the heavens to steal information, to listen to the unseen matters that were not meant for them. But now the skies were guarded. Flaming meteors chased them away. Access was denied. What once felt open was suddenly sealed. This was not punishment alone. It was protection. Revelation was descending, and the universe itself was enforcing its boundaries. The jinn understood what this meant. A messenger had come. Divine speech was being revealed. The rules had changed. They realized that no one could escape Allah, not on earth and not in the heavens. This realization carries fear, but not the kind that paralyzes. It is the fear that wakes you up, the fear that strips away illusions of safety built on arrogance. They knew then that belief was not optional anymore. Neutrality was not possible. One either submits or rebels, and every choice carries consequence. What should disturb us is not that jinn exist or that they listen. What should disturb us is how quickly they recognize the truth, while many humans, who hear the Quran again and again, remain distracted, skeptical, or unmoved. The jinn listened once and were transformed. Humans often hear their entire lives and remain unchanged. Surah Al-Jinn quietly places this contrast in front of us without accusation, without insult, and without forcing a conclusion. It simply shows us a mirror and leaves us alone with what we see. This is only the beginning of the story, but even here, the message is already clear. Guidance does not belong to one race, one species, or one world. It belongs to Allah alone, and when it descends, it reaches whoever is willing to truly listen. After the jinn listened and believed, something rare happened. They did not rush to glorify themselves, and they did not pretend they had always known the truth. Instead, they spoke with an honesty that cuts deep. They admitted their past without excuses. They confessed that among them were those who were upright and those who were far from it, and that their paths had always been divided. This confession matters because it strips away a dangerous illusion. The unseen world is not a realm of pure beings floating in constant obedience, nor is it a world of absolute evil. It is a world of moral responsibility, just like ours. The jinn openly acknowledged that they too made assumptions about Allah that were wrong, assumptions passed from one to another without knowledge, lies repeated so often that they began to feel like truth. When the Quran reached them, it did not merely add information. It exposed those inherited falsehoods and left them with no place to hide. They admitted that some among them used to speak outrageous claims about Allah, exaggerations that distorted His greatness instead of honoring it. This is deeply unsettling because it mirrors how false beliefs are born in every society, not through proof, but through repetition, not through certainty, but through comfort. The jinn realized that much of what they believed had no foundation, and the Quran forced them to confront that reality without mercy. There was no gradual softening, no easing into correction. The truth came down sharp, clean, and undeniable, and they accepted it because denial would have required deliberate rebellion. In their words, there is a quiet humility that humans often lack. They did not blame others. They did not blame circumstances. They simply acknowledged error and moved forward. Then the tone of their testimony shifts, and this is where the weight of Surah Al-Jinn truly settles in the chest. They speak about fear, not as weakness, but as awareness. They describe how they realized that escape from Allah is impossible. No matter where one goes, whether across the earth or into the heights of the heavens, Allah's authority surrounds everything. This realization dismantled a long-held arrogance among many of the jinn, an arrogance built on access to the unseen and movement beyond human limitation. They once believed that these abilities placed them outside the reach of consequence. The Quran destroyed that belief instantly. Power does not mean immunity. Knowledge does not mean safety. Movement does not mean freedom. Everything exists within the command of Allah, and nothing slips beyond it. They describe a change that had already begun before they heard the Quran, but which only made sense afterward. The heavens, once accessible, were now guarded. Paths that had been open were suddenly blocked. Flaming meteors chased them away when they attempted to listen to matters beyond their station. What is striking here is that they did not frame this as injustice. They understood it as a sign. Revelation had begun. Divine speech was descending, and the universe itself responded by sealing off corruption. This was not chaos. It was order being enforced. The skies were not hostile. They were protected. For beings who once believed they could gather information freely and manipulate it as they wished, this was a shock. It meant that the age of unchecked access was over. It meant that truth would now descend clean, guarded, and preserved, without interference. They realized that whatever was coming was serious, final, and decisive. This realization produced fear, but also clarity. Fear that strips arrogance and replaces it with submission is not destructive. It is corrective. The jinn understood that something greater than themselves was unfolding, and they stood at a crossroads they could no longer ignore. They also addressed a dangerous misunderstanding that had existed between humans and jinn for generations. Some humans, driven by fear or ignorance, used to seek protection from the jinn. They believed that aligning themselves with unseen beings would grant safety, power, or advantage. The jinn exposed the truth of this behavior without hesitation. They said that when humans sought refuge in them, it only increased fear and rebellion on both sides. It did not protect anyone. It deepened misguidance. This is not folklore. This is testimony preserved in the Quran itself. The unseen beings being sought for protection openly declare that such behavior leads nowhere but further darkness. This moment is critical because Islam completely severs this relationship of dependence. Protection belongs to Allah alone. Seeking safety in anything else, whether visible or invisible, is a spiritual dead end. The jinn did not present themselves as rivals to Allah. They stripped away the myth that they ever could be. They clarified that they themselves are in need of protection, guidance, and mercy. This dismantles fear-based superstition at its root and replaces it with something far stronger: trust in the one who controls both worlds. As their testimony continues, the jinn make another powerful declaration. They confirm that free will applies to them just as it applies to humans. Among them are those who submit and those who deviate. Those who submit seek righteousness, and those who turn away choose a path that leads to ruin. This statement carries a chilling implication. Accountability is universal. The fire is not reserved for one creation alone. Paradise is not exclusive to another. Every being that can choose is judged by that choice. The jinn were not promised special treatment, nor did they expect it. They accepted that submission brings safety and deviation brings consequence. There is no trace of complaint in their words, no resentment, no sense of injustice. Instead, there is acceptance of a system that is fair, even when it is severe. This is where Surah Al-Jinn quietly exposes human resistance. Humans often argue with divine decree, question accountability, and negotiate responsibility. The jinn listened once and accepted the rules without debate. That contrast is not accidental. It is meant to unsettle us. They understood that guidance itself is a mercy, not a guarantee. Allah guides whom He wills, and when guidance comes, rejecting it is no longer ignorance, it is defiance. This awareness pressed urgency into their message. They were no longer casual listeners. They became warners. They returned to their people not to entertain, but to caution. They spoke of belief, fear, correction, and consequence with seriousness because eternity had suddenly come into focus. What makes this part of the surah so heavy is that it removes every excuse humans cling to. The jinn could have claimed confusion. They could have claimed distance from revelation. They could have claimed limitation. They did none of that. They listened, understood, and responded. Their testimony stands as silent evidence against every heart that hears the Quran and chooses comfort over truth. By this point in the surah, the message is no longer just about the unseen world. It is about responsibility, humility, and the danger of inherited falsehoods. It is about how quickly certainty can collapse when truth arrives, and how fear can become the doorway to clarity instead of despair. The jinn were not terrified into belief. They were awakened into it. And once awake, they could never pretend to sleep again. This is why Surah Al-Jinn does not feel distant or mystical. It feels close, uncomfortably close. Because the same Quran that shook the unseen world continues to echo today, asking the same question without words. If those who are hidden listened and believed, what is stopping those who stand in the light? One of the most powerful truths revealed in this part of Surah Al-Jinn is something that quietly dismantles human arrogance without raising its voice. Free will does not belong to humanity alone. It was never exclusive. The jinn themselves declare, without hesitation, that among them are those who submit and those who deviate, those who choose righteousness and those who choose corruption. This single admission carries enormous weight because it places jinn and humans on the same moral ground. Different creation, different substance, different abilities, but the same test. Choice, responsibility, consequence. The jinn were not created as background figures or tools in a cosmic story centered only on humans. They were created with intention, awareness, and accountability, and Surah Al-Jinn makes that unmistakably clear. They speak about submission not as an abstract idea, but as a deliberate decision. To submit is to align oneself with truth after recognizing it. To deviate is to turn away knowingly. There is no language of confusion here, no claim of misunderstanding. They understood exactly what was at stake. When they say that those who submit are seeking the right path, they are acknowledging effort, struggle, and intention. Guidance is not accidental. It is pursued. At the same time, when they describe those who deviate as fuel for hellfire, the words land with a chilling finality. There is no attempt to soften the reality. They are not speculating. They are stating a conclusion that became clear to them the moment the Quran entered their hearts. This is where Surah Al-Jinn becomes deeply uncomfortable for anyone who relies on excuses. The jinn do not argue about fairness. They do not demand exceptions. They do not claim that their nature excuses their behavior. They accept the rules as they are. Accountability follows ability, and choice follows awareness. Once awareness is present, neutrality disappears. Silence becomes a stance. Delay becomes rejection. The jinn understood this immediately, and that understanding reshaped how they viewed existence itself. What is especially striking is how they describe misguidance. They do not romanticize it. They do not frame it as freedom or independence. They describe it as deviation, a turning away from balance. In their words, misguidance is not an alternative lifestyle. It is a path with an ending that is known and unavoidable. This clarity strips misguidance of its illusions. It is not rebellion with style. It is loss with consequences. Surah Al-Jinn also quietly dismantles another deeply rooted falsehood, the idea that certain beings are closer to Allah by nature alone. The jinn do not claim special status. They do not suggest that their unseen nature grants them proximity or favor. In fact, they emphasize the opposite. Submission is what brings one closer, not creation, not ability, not access to the unseen. This principle runs straight through Islamic belief, and here it is spoken by the unseen themselves. Nearness to Allah is earned through obedience, humility, and truthfulness, not through mystery or power. Then comes a confession that echoes through history like a warning that arrived too late for many. The jinn admit that humans and jinn alike used to exaggerate lies about Allah. This statement is devastating in its simplicity. False beliefs were not always invented out of malice. Many were exaggerated over time, distorted through storytelling, fear, speculation, and repetition. The jinn realized that these exaggerations gradually replaced truth, until lies felt familiar and familiarity felt like certainty. When the Quran arrived, it did not negotiate with these distortions. It exposed them. They acknowledged that Allah's majesty is far above what anyone claimed, far above the idea of partners, far above lineage, far above dependence. This is pure Tawheed, spoken without poetry or flourish. It is direct, clean, and uncompromising. The jinn do not attribute this realization to intelligence or spiritual insight. They attribute it to listening. They heard the Quran, and false images of Allah collapsed under its weight. This moment is critical because it reveals how shirk truly operates. It does not always begin with worship. It often begins with imagination. People imagine Allah incorrectly, then build beliefs, practices, and fears around that false image. The jinn recognized that much of what they once believed was built on exaggeration rather than knowledge. The Quran returned Allah to his rightful position, absolute, unmatched, and beyond distortion. When that happened, everything else fell into place. They also clarify something that many humans misunderstand to this day. The jinn were not partners with Allah. They were never divine. They were never meant to be intermediaries. They were created servants who, like humans, could obey or disobey. This destroys centuries of myth in a single breath. Fear-driven worship, superstition, and spiritual dependence are all exposed as illusions. The jinn themselves deny the roles humans assign to them. There is an almost painful honesty in how they speak about the past. They admit that humans used to seek refuge in jinn, believing it would bring safety. Instead, it increased fear on both sides. Humans became more dependent, and jinn became more arrogant or more corrupted. No one benefited. This admission is not theoretical. It is experiential. It comes from lived reality in the unseen world. The Quran preserves this confession so humanity does not repeat the same mistake under different names or practices. This is where Surah Al-Jinn quietly reorients fear. Fear is not meant to be scattered among creation. It is meant to be directed toward the Creator. When fear is misplaced, it multiplies. When fear is placed correctly, it stabilizes. The jinn discovered this truth the hard way. When they feared Allah, clarity followed. When humans feared jinn, confusion spread. The surah does not mock this behavior. It corrects it. What makes these verses linger is how closely they mirror the human condition. Humans also inherit beliefs. Humans also exaggerate ideas about Allah. Humans also seek protection in things they can see and things they cannot. Humans also struggle with submission when it threatens comfort or identity. The jinn are not presented as exotic beings with alien problems. They are presented as reflections, stripped of excuses. By the time this part of the surah settles in, something becomes impossible to ignore. The unseen world is not chaotic or mythical. It is structured, accountable, and bound by the same divine authority that governs humanity. The jinn were not impressed by mystery. They were humbled by truth. And once humbled, they spoke with a seriousness that demands attention. This is why Surah Al-Jinn does not feel like a story meant to entertain curiosity about the unseen. It feels like a warning wrapped in testimony. The jinn listened, believed, corrected themselves, and accepted accountability without delay. They did not wait for comfort. They did not wait for consensus. They responded while the truth was still fresh in their hearts. And the quiet question that follows is unavoidable. If beings hidden from sight could hear the Quran once and realign their entire understanding of existence, what excuse remains for those who hear it again and again and choose to remain unchanged? As the words of Surah Al-Jinn continue to unfold, the focus quietly shifts away from the unseen world and lands firmly on humanity, almost without warning. The jinn are no longer the mystery. We are. Their testimony is not preserved to satisfy curiosity about hidden beings, but to confront humans with an uncomfortable mirror. Again and again, the Quran does this. It allows others to speak so that humans may listen without immediately becoming defensive. And here, it is the jinn who unknowingly expose a painful contrast. They heard the Quran once and believed. Many humans hear it their entire lives and remain unchanged. This part of the surah carries a subtle rebuke, though it is never spoken harshly. The jinn describe how the Quran guided them to what is right, how it clarified truth from falsehood, how it restructured their understanding of Allah and existence. Nothing in their words suggests confusion or resistance. There is no sense of delay. The moment understanding arrived, action followed. Belief was not treated as a lifestyle choice or a cultural identity. It was treated as a response to truth. This stands in stark contrast to how many humans interact with revelation. Humans debate, postpone, rationalize, and compartmentalize. The jinn simply listened and submitted. The Quran does not need to say this directly. The implication hangs in the air. If guidance could penetrate the unseen realm so cleanly, then resistance to guidance is not about clarity. It is about the heart. This is one of the most unsettling lessons of Surah Al-Jinn. Misguidance is rarely the result of not knowing. It is often the result of knowing and choosing something else anyway. Comfort, habit, ego, fear of change. The jinn had their own societies, their own norms, their own histories of belief. Submission meant disruption. It meant abandoning what was familiar. And still, they chose it. This is why Surah Al-Jinn does not glorify human intellect or human progress. It quietly dismantles the idea that access to information equals guidance. Humans pride themselves on knowledge, on analysis, on debate. Yet the jinn, with far less access to structured revelation, recognized truth instantly when it arrived. The Quran forces the listener to confront a difficult question. If belief is so clear when the heart is open, then what exactly is blocking the heart? The surah also redefines what it means to be a messenger. When the jinn speak about hearing the Quran, they do not describe a performance or a display of supernatural power. They describe words recited plainly, steadily, without spectacle. The power was not in presentation, it was in origin. This matters deeply because it dismantles another common human expectation. Many people search for faith through emotional highs, signs, or dramatic experiences. Surah Al-Jinn shows that truth does not need to announce itself loudly. When it is real, it resonates on its own. There is also an unspoken warning here. If the jinn recognize the Quran as guidance, then rejecting it after understanding becomes a conscious act of defiance. Ignorance might excuse confusion, but awareness removes that excuse entirely. The jinn understood this immediately. That is why they spoke with urgency when they returned to their people. They knew that once truth arrives, delay becomes dangerous. Silence becomes complicity. Comfort becomes a trap. As the surah continues, another powerful clarification emerges, one that cuts through centuries of misunderstanding and exaggeration. The Messenger of Allah did not know the jinn were listening. This detail is not minor, it is foundational. It confirms, beyond doubt, that he did not possess independent knowledge of the unseen. He did not summon hidden beings. He did not control them. He did not even perceive them unless Allah informed him. This single point dismantles myths of mystical authority and reinforces a core Islamic belief. Revelation flows only by Allah's permission. This is crucial because throughout history, humans have been tempted to elevate messengers beyond their role. Surah Al-Jinn closes that door firmly. Even when an unseen audience gathered around him, even when beings from another realm listened in silence, he remained unaware until Allah revealed it. This preserves the purity of prophethood. The messenger was a servant, not a controller of realms, a receiver of revelation, not its source, a guide, not a gatekeeper of the unseen. This also carries a deeper lesson about humility. If the greatest of humanity did not claim access to the unseen beyond what Allah revealed, then every claim of hidden knowledge, secret access, or spiritual control that contradicts this becomes immediately suspect. Islam does not encourage fascination with the unseen. It encourages submission to the known truth revealed by Allah. Surah Al-Jinn reinforces this by grounding everything in revelation, not experience. There is also something deeply sobering about the fact that the messenger delivered guidance without knowing who was listening. Humans often tailor their words based on their audience. They soften, exaggerate, perform, or withhold, depending on who is present. Revelation does not operate that way. The Quran was recited sincerely, without awareness of the unseen listeners, and yet it reached exactly who it was meant to reach. This shows that guidance is not dependent on human intention alone. Allah delivers truth to whom He wills, when He wills, through means we cannot predict. The jinn listened unseen. Humans listened seen. The words were the same. The difference was not the message. It was the response. This is perhaps the most uncomfortable realization of all. The Quran does not change. Hearts do. Surah Al-Jinn also quietly affirms the universality of the message. The Quran was not revealed only for one people, one culture, or one realm. Its guidance crossed the boundary between seen and unseen effortlessly. This confirms that Islam is not a tribal faith or a localized tradition. It is a universal call to submission, reaching wherever Allah allows it to reach. The jinn were not an afterthought. They were included in the divine address without being directly addressed. The message found them anyway. This universality removes another common excuse. People often claim that guidance is not meant for them, that it belongs to another time, another place, another group. Surah Al-Jinn exposes the weakness of this claim. If guidance could reach beings hidden from human sight, then distance, culture, and background lose their power as barriers. What remains is willingness. There is a quiet humility in how this part of the surah unfolds. No threats are shouted. No comparisons are forced. The jinn simply testify. They listened. They believed. They corrected themselves. They accepted accountability. And their story is preserved, not to elevate them, but to awaken us. The messenger did not need to see the unseen for the unseen to be affected. The Quran did not need to be explained for truth to be recognized. Everything unfolded according to divine wisdom, without spectacle, without force, and without compromise. That is what makes this story linger. It is not dramatic in the way humans expect drama. It is heavy in the way truth often is. By the time this part of Surah Al-Jinn settles in the heart, one realization becomes impossible to escape. Guidance has never been the problem. The problem has always been response. The jinn responded immediately. Humans are still deciding, and that decision, delayed or denied, is where the real tension of this surah lives. As Surah Al-Jinn moves toward its closing, it delivers one of the clearest and most protective warnings in the entire Quran. A warning that cuts through fear, curiosity, and superstition in a single motion. It addresses a human instinct that has existed for as long as fear itself. The urge to seek protection in whatever feels powerful, hidden, or unknown. For centuries, people turned to the jinn hoping for safety, knowledge, advantage, or control. Some did it out of desperation. Others did it out of arrogance. Surah Al-Jinn exposes the reality of that behavior without myth, without drama, and without ambiguity. Seeking refuge in jinn never brought protection. It only increased fear, confusion, and rebellion on both sides. This is not a human accusation against the unseen. It is a confession from the unseen themselves. The jinn openly state that when humans sought refuge with them, it did not elevate anyone. It made matters worse. Humans became more dependent and more afraid, while jinn, who were already misguided, grew more arrogant and destructive. What people thought was safety was actually spiritual erosion. What they thought was strength was weakness in disguise. Islam does not present this as a superstition to be mocked. It presents it as a pattern to be broken. The Quran redirects fear back to its rightful place. Fear is not meant to be scattered among creation. When fear is divided, it multiplies. When fear is misdirected, it enslaves. Surah Al-Jinn restores fear to where it belongs, with Allah alone. This is not fear that crushes the soul. It is fear that stabilizes it. When fear is directed toward the one who controls all realms, everything else loses its grip. The unseen becomes less frightening. The unknown becomes less powerful. Creation returns to its proper size. This redirection is critical because fascination with the unseen can quietly become a doorway to misguidance. Islam does not deny the existence of the unseen, but it strictly regulates how believers engage with it. There is no benefit in chasing hidden forces, secret knowledge, or supernatural shortcuts. Surah Al-Jinn closes every door that leads away from Tawheed and leaves only one open. Trust Allah. Seek protection from Allah. Ask guidance from Allah. Everything else leads to dependency, fear, and distortion. Then the surah delivers a statement that leaves no room for negotiation. The messenger declares that he does not control harm or benefit for himself, and that he does not possess knowledge of the unseen except what Allah reveals. This declaration is not defensive. It is clarifying. It dismantles every exaggerated expectation humans place on prophets, scholars, spiritual leaders, or unseen beings. No one controls destiny. No one distributes fate. No one manages the unseen. Allah alone. This truth is uncomfortable for those who want intermediaries. It removes the illusion that someone else can shield you from accountability or bargain on your behalf without Allah's permission. Islam does not operate on secret access or hidden leverage. It operates on submission. Surah Al-Jinn reinforces this with precision. Even the messenger stands as a servant who receives revelation, not as a being who commands the unseen. There is a quiet but firm boundary being drawn here. Do not elevate anyone beyond their station. Do not reduce Allah by exaggerating creation. Do not confuse guidance with mysticism. Truth does not need mystery to be powerful. It needs clarity. As the surah nears its end, the tone becomes solemn but steady. The message is no longer about jinn or humans as separate categories. It is about responsibility. Everyone who hears the message stands exposed to the same reality. Those who convey Allah's message do not control outcomes. They deliver. Those who hear are responsible for how they respond. There is no ambiguity here. Obedience brings safety. Rejection brings consequence. The Quran states clearly that those who disobey Allah and His Messenger will face the fire of hell, abiding therein. This is not said with anger. It is said with certainty. The Quran does not threaten to intimidate. It warns to awaken. The jinn understood this immediately. Humans often hear it and look away. There is also a profound reminder embedded in these final verses. Humans often assume that power belongs to those who appear dominant, numerous, or influential. Surah Al-Jinn quietly overturns this assumption. True power belongs to Allah alone. Numbers do not intimidate Him. Resistance does not weaken Him. Time does not exhaust Him. Everything unfolds according to His knowledge and measure. Allah knows the unseen completely, not partially, not gradually. Completely. He knows what has passed and what is coming. He surrounds everything with knowledge. Nothing escapes. Nothing surprises. Nothing slips through cracks. This declaration closes the surah with weight and finality. The universe is not chaotic. It is measured. It is observed. It is governed. The chilling part is not that Allah knows. The chilling part is that we live as if He does not. Surah Al-Jinn leaves the listener in a state of reflection rather than spectacle. There are no dramatic conclusions, no visual endings, just truth standing still, waiting for a response. The jinn responded instantly. They listened, believed, corrected themselves, and warned others. Humans have the same opportunity, but with far fewer excuses. The unseen world heard the Quran and aligned itself with it. The seen world continues to debate it. That contrast lingers long after the surah ends. It forces a question that cannot be answered casually. If those hidden from sight recognize the authority of Allah without hesitation, what exactly is preventing those who see, hear, and reason from doing the same? This is the final chill of Surah Al-Jinn, not the existence of unseen beings, not their stories, but their response. They did not delay. They did not demand comfort. They did not negotiate truth. They submitted. And the Quran now rests in human hands, unchanged, recited, accessible, waiting. The unseen has already answered. The decision that remains belongs entirely to us.